Thank you, folks, for joining in today for this session. This is a very exciting session for a couple of reasons. For one, this is where we announce a very interesting partnership between Zomentum and Tech ID Manager, which I'm very buzzed about. So we will be launching that towards the end of this conversation, and there's a little something for all of you to take advantage of. And during the course of this conversation, of course, we will be talking about very real, anecdotal, and practical applications of automations, AI, and compliance in MSP practices, right? So that's the agenda for this conversation. Is to talk about real challenges, real problems, real opportunities that exist in these spaces. And of course, I've got Martin with me as well. Maybe we'll start off with a very quick introductions. Here I'm Raghav. I lead partnerships and growth initiatives here at Zomentum. For those of you who don't know what Zomentum is a full-blown revenue platform for managed service providers, right? So from the minute somebody is interested in something, so you have an opportunity that you work on, for you to be able to manage your opportunities, manage your pipelines, get documents out, quotations, contracts, e-signatures, the whole 9 yards of contract management, e-signatures, and ultimately through to payment processing as well, right? So that's essentially what Zomentum does. And I play a very small part in, kind of helping MSPs that use Zomentum to make the most of their revenue platform. So that's me on the call. And I'm joined by a very special guest, Martin, with me as well. Martin is the founder of Tech ID Manager. Martin, over to you if you want to introduce yourself and introduce Tech ID Manager as well.
Sure. Thanks, Raghav. Martin White, CTO and founder of Tech ID Manager. I saw a particular privilege account management problem that was real specific to MSPs and the access of their technicians to their client networks. Saw this about 5 years ago. Well, saw it about 10 years ago when I was working at MSP. 5 years ago, I quit my job, started Tech ID Manager, and we have a platform that does privilege account management and secrets management specific to MSPs and VARs to help control technician access into client networks. When you add technicians, remove technicians, make sure you use least privileged, a lot of stuff around that security compliance with access controls is what we handle. Yeah. So I'm super excited to be talking to you today, Raghav.
Likewise, Martin. Likewise, I see a few hands raised as well. There is a question about, let me just quickly take a check again. Everyone's able to hear us? Yeah. Okay. Now I've got that the problem's been solved. Let's get started then, Martin. So we'll structure this conversation. Maybe we'll go through the discussion for about the 20-25 minutes, and then we open it up for question and answers, right? But that said, if there are any questions, we'll take them as we go along. So if there are any questions, please put your hand up or just raise those questions in the Q&A bar at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have this as an interactive conversation. To start off with, I think the agenda for this conversation is very clear. We're going to talk about practical applications of automations. We're going to be talking about the pros, the cons, the practical realities of AI for MSP practices. And we're going to be talking about compliance frameworks as well, right? So first up, Martin, let's talk about how at Tech ID Manager, right? And in terms of what you do to currently leverage automation in your operations, how does Tech ID Manager come in from an automations perspective and helping MSPs streamline their operations?
Yeah. So my background is automation. I've done industrial automation, business system automations at MSPs to bring the different siloed business systems together to do overall MSP integration work. And specifically Tech ID Manager, there's a problem that is too big to solve manually, so you have to automate it. And that's when technicians need access to client networks. You have to automate that. So we automate that. We create accounts, set rights, disable accounts, do just-in-time accounts, do managed accounts, we do shared accounts, we do unique accounts, we do service account rotation, like all these things. And automation is really needed to make that work. What all the cybersecurity frameworks say you need to do, it's a unique account for each person. That problem's too big for MSPs to solve manually. That's like Tech ID Manager is an automation product that automates what you should be doing anyway. What MSPs do now is they don't automate it. A lot of them don't automate it. It's like a lot of the things they do, like with an RMM and shell scripts to do things that you automate. We automate a lot of that. I don't know what else to say about it, really. There's some, like without doing a whole demo of the product, there's a lot of automation it does. Automating and finding and helping use credentials. Yeah, it's really Yeah.
But that's it, Martin. So one of the common questions that I've had, and in our conversations with our managed service providers that we work with, right, is about the challenges they run into when they're actually trying to integrate automation tools into their MSP practices, right? So when you're talking about initial challenges and hiccups and kind of things that need to be wary of when you're automating your processes, what do you make of that?
So an MSP, when they're automating stuff, there's you have to really start with what you're doing manually. You look at the manual steps and you determine, like with any automation, can you automate it? And most of the time, the first attempt when somebody tries to automate something is real rogue. They take the exact manual procedure they did last time and they automate those exact steps. And then it needs to be more complicated because there'll be different conditions. Things will go wrong. You have to handle those error conditions. So then like the automation becomes a little more complicated. You have step A, step B. Well, if step B succeeded, then you do step C. If B did not succeed, then you have to do D before C. There's a lot of flow that goes on there. So that error correction, error handling, and knowing what next step to do is the real basis of automation. It's what makes automation useful. If you just take a series of steps and you and just automate them in order and roguely go through A, B, C, D, it will fix the problem sometimes. It might fix it 10% of the time, might fix it 90% of the time. But when it doesn't fix it, steps that happen after something has failed generally make things worse. This is one area where AI and good automation really meld together. When you're automating a process, AI is a large set of this problem and how it's been solved that looks at all these things so that when you write that automation or when you say automate the steps, the AI has a bigger basis from which to grow and learn. It's not taking one person's manual steps and automating them. Really, it's like the macros that used to exist in Excel and Word for those of us that are older and have ever used those macros in the Office products. They would record what you did and play it back. And that's really the basis of automation. And that has, over the course of my career, grown from like just playback to smarter. And now they had Clippy for a while, which would help you do those tasks in a little more automated fashion, a little more AI-esque. But now you have full LLMs or AIs that will help you do tasks that not only based on the recording you did, but on the experience of hundreds or thousands or even millions of people having done that same task in different ways, it'll generalize that. And that is why AI is useful and helpful for automation. It's really good at a lot of things. It's good at taking a problem set and figuring out what's wrong with it. It's good. And like I've seen MSPs use AI and automation in a lot of different ways. I talked to thousands of MSPs and I talked to many of them in great detail about their use of AI in their companies and that what has worked, what hasn't worked. And I think we should get into that. That's really my favorite thing to talk about.
I think so too. I think we should get into the specifics, right? In terms of and I can think of a few cases as well. Can you share a case or a couple of cases, right, wherein automating the process for MSPs has actually significantly improved the efficiency or client satisfaction for MSPs? Can we get into the specifics of scenarios where automation comes in and what can be automated in those cases?
Yeah, sure. There's a real specific instance I was involved in where I was working with an MSP and they had 3 specific systems. They were all siloed data. There was their RMM, their ticketing system, their RMM, their billing system, which was QuickBooks, and a backup system. And they were all separate information. Well, there was a person who was supposed to, at the end of every month, look at the number of people that were being backed up, look at who was being billed, and look at what was actually happening and collate all that information from the 3 different systems, and then make sure that all the billing matched up and lined up. Well, there were 400 plus clients being backed up, different servers, different places. You had like a lot of different information had to be collated. And it was named one thing in the RMM. It was named a different thing in the billing system. And it was named a different thing in the backup system. So there was no clear tie-ins. I wrote a system that pulled information from all 3, collated all the information, and then even went and did like looked at the backup reports that ran every day and would give an overall monthly metric to this client is paying for backup, is getting backed up, and has succeeded this many times, and got the bill for it. And when I went through the first time and ran this, I noticed that about a third of the clients weren't right. They were getting billed for something that wasn't happening, or something that was happening that wasn't getting billed for. So there was this big disconnect between sales, billing, and actual deliverance of work. And it was really because the systems were isolated. So like in that case, automating and pulling all this information, all these systems together helped get people billed for work that was being done and people to do work that had been sold but hadn't been properly conveyed to the people that needed to set it up. So the removal and the integration of information from different systems is a real big place where automation can help, because at the scale that MSP was running, 400 plus clients, 50 to 100,000 endpoints, you just can't manually collate all that information, see what's working, what's not. So it was a pretty straightforward automation task that helped that particular MSP a lot. Helped bottom line, helped revenue, helped delivery, helped everybody involved, because it's just something you can't do manually. And that's a big piece of automation, is it frees up somebody's time, or it does something that wasn't getting done before because it's just too untenable of a task for somebody to try manually.
No, absolutely. I think we've got a couple of questions as well on that lines. I think there's one about the specifics of the partnership we have, which of course we'll talk about towards the end of this conversation. And there's one from Darren, which talks about measuring the ROI for these projects, right? And I think it comes. We've seen that a significant number of times. We work with a lot of MSPs. From a sales perspective as well, right? Where they do a certain number of quotes, a certain number of contracts. It's not all done on different Excel sheets, and you have to go to a supplier database, get that pricing information, stocks, bring it into an Excel sheet or a Word document, send it across. But then the question then really comes up, like, do I really need a tool that does all of this for me? Do I need to automate this process, right? I think that kind of ties down into Darren's question as well. I think the question is around ROI. How do you tangibly measure ROI for automation in your MSP projects?
So there's the bottom line of, did the MSP make more money after the automation than it did before the automation? And the answer, and how much did that automation cost? If you're looking for ROI, I know this. I did a bunch of work in industrial automation, and there was a very clear metric there. You made so many widgets. It took so many seconds to make a widget. When you automated or optimized, it took so many less seconds to make the same widget. You sold the widget for so many dollars. And you could real clearly say, yes, this automation was worth it. For an MSP, it's not as obvious unless you consider the widget like a ticket, or the widget $1. How many tickets did you solve? How many things did you do? I talked to a local MSP here in the upstate of South Carolina, and they had the metric that they were looking at was average response time to tickets. Their average response time to tickets was, I believe, in the 30-minute range. So somebody would send a ticket in or call in and leave a message, and within 30 minutes, they on average would get back to that person and respond. They wanted to take this 30-minute time and reduce it to sub 5 minutes. So they looked at everything they were doing. They found some areas to optimize. One big thing was the polling rate, and like getting the ticket to be looked at and then distributed to a technician, and then the technician calling back was the process. They were able to define this process, and then they automated it. They took and used, in this particular case, they used AI to look at what the ticket was and what that particular person had asked for before and other things about the company. And then they were able to, with AI, make a suggestion about which technician should handle this ticket and what they might need to do. And that alone took their service delivery time, their response time, from 30 minutes down to like under 20 minutes, because the service manager didn't have to read the whole ticket. They got a summary from AI. They got the person that was probably best to solve this and a list of other people. And it's like, oh, yes, the summary looks right. They scanned it. They didn't have to think about it as much, and they could just distribute it and automate it. Then they went, so that was a really good use of AI and automation. And for them, there was a definitive ROI on the metric that they were attacking, which was average time to respond to a service ticket. They went a little bit further, and they integrated AI into telling that technician who first got assigned the ticket, looked at all the tickets this client and this particular person had entered before, looked at what the type of problem was and like a general database of how problem solutions, and they would provide to the technician when they got assigned a ticket. This is the ticket. Here's the summary. Here is the documentation we think is appropriate for solving this problem. And here's a summary of that documentation. So the technician could read the two summaries real quick. If he didn't understand it, he'd go back and read the supporting documentation. And then he could really quickly be like, I know what this problem is. I've dealt with this before, or I know what this is, and they'd go solve it. They took their average response time with the summaries to technicians from that 30-minute original down to under a minute. They ended up with, I believe they said 6 technicians that are on call, sitting there waiting to handle tickets. They went from being a queue on an average of 3 or 4 tickets deep for each person to 1 to 2 people being idle, waiting for a ticket to show up. So as soon as a ticket showed up, somebody was instantly able to jump on it, took their response time down to under a minute, which from a ROI perspective, directly addressed the number that they were looking to address. They were very specifically looking to get their service ticket response time down from 30 minutes to they were looking at 6 minutes, but they got it under a minute, which made them very happy. From a dollars perspective, they spent a lot of money on it. I never dug into, did they make more money because of it? Because that wasn't their goal. Their goal was reduction of response time. So ROI is really about what are you trying to accomplish, and then do those things you're trying to accomplish, the measurable ROIs. Does that? There's a different question about from a business perspective, does that grow your business? Because the technical perspective is driven by business goals, and yeah, that's a whole different discussion. But in this particular AI use, they were looking very specifically to reduce service ticket time, and the return on investment was definitely there.
Gotcha. There's a few questions as well along these lines, Martin. I think there's one question about, I know we speak about AI technologies, but if there's any specific AI technologies that you've seen MSPs adopt more and more of, and how do they essentially enhance our ability to predict and solve problems for our clients? And that's one question that's coming from Jeff. And there's another one about compliance. We'll get into compliance from Upendra. We'll get into that in just a bit as well. But I think the question here is essentially any specific AI technologies that you have in mind, and how do these technologies typically, enhance the MSP's ability to predict and solve problems for their clients?
Yeah. So there are two questions there, like specific technologies and how does it help to enhance the specific technologies. What's really important, in my opinion, on the MSPs I've talked to there is how well integrated into the workflow it is. I heard one MSP use the term swivel chair AI, and that was the worst thing they implemented. It was a complete and total disaster where they had their existing RMM and ticketing tool, PSA, and then they had beside it, they had a window with a AI where they could put stuff, copy paste in, get responses, copy paste back out. And that having to swivel the chair between 2 different tools meant that one, people didn't use it. It wasn't used consistently, and that it interrupted the workflow. Somebody had to leave one tool to go on another tool, and that was a real negative. So it didn't matter that which tool they use, much more like, because all the LLMs, they're kind of on par, and they're all like stepping each other up every time. So if you choose a specific tool today, based on some metrics on AI or LLMs or machine learning, whatever, next month, another tool is going to beat those metrics. The month after that, that original tool is going to beat it. So it's really important, more than which specific tool, it's very important that it's integrated into the workflow. So that when if the technician is the targeted person to use the AI, it is right there and it's brought to them. This is really, like Word is a great example of that. Microsoft Word. When you're typing a sentence, you don't have to take that sentence and put it in some other tool to get the grammar. In Word, it underlines in red the things that are wrong, so you can directly fix it there. If Word was just a prettier or a text formatter, and that intelligence about grammar and spelling wasn't in it, people wouldn't use it. If they had to go somewhere else, then they copy it back. What the most important thing for AI implementations is integrated workflow. So when somebody goes to do something, it's right there. And they don't have to switch windows, don't have to change tools, and you can that will let the AI be more involved, watch their workflow, all those kind of things. So if you use a particular RMM, look at those AI tools that can integrate with that RMM. If you look at a particular service distribution tool, look at the AIs that integrate with that. And if there are none that integrate, you need development staff to make that work, or you have to make a project out of it. And then you have actual dollar costs. But that workflow integration is most important. It's much more important than what specific tool, whether you choose Copilot or ChatGPT or Bixby or whoever the others are. That is less important than having it integrated in the workflow. Another important thing that you like from a business perspective about which AI specific technology you choose is the licensing that goes with it. Is your data yours? Is your data being sent off to somebody else to process? Is your data being used to enhance other people's work? That's really a business choice more than a technical choice. Like I know for us, the use of ChatGPT for development activities internal to Tech ID Manager, there are specific concerns about taking whole sections of code, pasting them in the ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT learning from that. So we generally will use pros to ask ChatGPT about a programming problem, or we'll abstract the section of code that we are copying in specifically for licensing reasons so that they don't get any of the IP, and then we'll answer the specific question you're looking for, and then we'll reintegrate that back into the code base. Yeah.
No,
did I answer all the questions there? Like,
no, absolutely. I think it applies to just software in general as well, right? In terms of there are these days, right? There aren't so many things as bad tools and good tools. It's just how integrated are the tools that you work with, right? And I think that I think the examples go way beyond just our space in the MSPs. We look at the Salesforce or the HubSpot ecosystems and how much they're investing into their app marketplaces is essentially the cornerstone of how successful customers are. If customers are integrated with 2 or 3 more solutions, then the chances of them being very successful on those platforms are much, much higher, right? So, and entirely empathize with that answer of yours. And in general, in terms of a trend, right? Where do we see AI impacting MSP operations or MSP processes in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Where are we headed here, according to you?
I think it can impact a lot of different areas of the business. I know one MSP that I know actually several, but like one specific that used it to reduce that service delivery time very effectively. That same MSP tried to implement it between customer and technician in the emails that went back and forth between their technicians and the customers, because the technicians would speak in technical jargon, the customers wouldn't understand it. So they integrated some AI there to pretty up the emails the technicians sent to make them better, make them nicer for the customer to read. And that had a very negative impact. The technicians didn't check those emails. They didn't learn from them. So their writing and interacting with customers actually got worse. They would get shorter, more terse, more specific, and less wordy. And the customer interactions actually degraded over it. I knew another MSP, like several, but like one specifically, who had an excellent experience with their technicians using AI to improve customer interactions. The technicians would write something to the customer. It would go to AI, and the AI would say, hey, we suggest instead of saying this, you say this. The technicians would have to read and approve the changes and then send them. And that caused their technicians to really level up their customer interactions, and the AI made less and less suggestions or more refined suggestions. But in two different MSPs trying to implement the same type of AI in the same spot in their business led to 2 really different outcomes. One that had a negative outcome, one that had a positive outcome, because, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know if it was a culture thing at the MSP where it failed or a culture thing at the MSP where it succeeded. One had a culture of more training and one had a culture of more getting things out the door. I don't know. But that specific example really points that it's, as an industrial whole, the MSPs might not all use AI in the same way. Like, there are different, they might not all use it in the same spot. I think that there are lots of places in summarizing information and in person-to-person interaction where AI is truly killing it right now. Those are some phenomenal things that they can do. They can take entire documents, entire questions that customers have. They can summarize it up. They can remove all the fluff and give a technician a real specific statement on what the problem is. They can also take a statement from a technician and make it very nice, add like family interactions to it, add like make somebody feel really good about the interaction between technicians, but they don't always get applied, even applied the same, they don't always succeed. So I can't think of an example where something has been so industry changing and so differently applied where it has succeeded and failed. I think we are still in those early throes of figuring out not just the MSP space, but in society in general, where AI is going to fit in, what it's going to do, what it's going to help with. So where it goes in 5 years, I think that there will definitely be impacts. It will definitely change and automate a lot more business processes. But I don't think that I can point out the specific ways that the specific business pieces where it'll interact. I think that those two, summarizing information and person-to-person interactions, are really good ones. But I've also had some negative examples where person-to-person interaction was actually harmed by AI. You know, so where does it go? It's going to go somewhere. We're still too early to know.
There's a few questions. I think it's time to take a couple of questions at least. There's one from Upendra who talks about compliance. I know we were going to come to compliance in just a bit. The first question is, how can MSPs leverage automation for their compliance requirements? Right. There's a follow-up question from Dan, which maybe we'll wait for that. Maybe we can start off with the first one, which is about how they can, essentially, let me just repeat the question. How can MSPs leverage automation for their compliance requirements?
Yeah, all the requirements, like automation in pen testing is one way you can definitely leverage that. Pen testing used to be just calling the particular ports, but it has gotten much better with automation and AI, knowing kind of how to interpret the information that comes back from when it's doing pen testing. Automating and evidence collection. A big thing about security frameworks and security audits and things is collecting that information. If you can automate that evidence collection for an audit, you can save tons of time. If you don't have to remote into a machine to do screenshots, to save the screenshots off, if you can just automate that, you can save a lot of personal time and get your return on investment there is really dollars in people's time. People can spend their time doing more intelligent work rather than the mechanical reproduction of the same thing over and over. So where automation really shines is freeing people up from that mechanical reproduction of the same thing over and over, you know? So like that's, and then specifically just to plug Tech ID Manager automates privileged account management. So like that's one area where a lot of MSPs fall down in security compliance because they don't do the right things. We can help with that. What do you think? Where do you think that automation can help with compliance?
No, absolutely. I agree with that as well, right? In terms of there's a bunch of different questions that come along as well. In terms of one is about how can it help with streamlining processes, but then the other question is how do you balance the whole regulatory compliance framework with also the need to innovate and adapting, or with the need to adopt newer technologies as they come along as well, right? So how do you find that balance essentially?
I was talking to a cyber security compliance auditor for SOC 2 frameworks recently, and they were saying how lots of companies will make their policies too specific, and that will prevent them from being able to iterate on the policies and implement newer software. And you really need to have a much more generalized policy, and the procedure, which is easier to change in the compliance frameworks, needs to be more specific. You can say your policy is you do something very generic, but your procedures for doing it should be what's specific and easier to change. And that is a big way that you can keep your separation and make it easier to adopt newer technologies into your security compliance. Like if your policy says that you remote into this machine to then access this other machine, that's really specific. It's hard to change policies, but your procedures, much easier to change, is what they were saying. So like make sure that you have appropriately delineate different responsibilities.
But the question does arise, right, Martin, in terms of when we have this onus on, and of course quite justifiably so, on compliance framework requirements. Are there other scenarios, or are there any specific instances that you can share where the compliance framework actually affects your tech department? or it affects your service delivery, right? Does it come in the way of some of those functions?
For us specifically, or do you think for like MSPs in general? Like
you could answer either way, right? For the MSPs that you work with, I know you work with a significant number of MSPs as well. Any specific instances where you see this come in the way of service delivery itself, which is at the end of the day is the North Star metric, right, for all of us.
I have seen automation of security stuff help delivery speeds. There's a specific example where one of our customers was using before we came on board. They were using a documentation tool to store a shared username and a shared password that they accessed all of their clients with. When a technician went to access a client, they would open up the documentation tool, search the documentation, find this username and password, and then get logged in and do the thing they needed to do. This had several issues. They didn't know who was doing it. And it's because several of the technicians were writing the information down for clients they accessed often. They weren't going the standard way to get there. And then when they implemented Tech ID Manager, it was 800% faster to find and use the credential that was specific to the person when they went to access their clients' domains or networks or Azure tenants or whatever they accessed. So like the implementation of automation gave them better cybersecurity and faster access to their client networks to get what they needed to get done. So like you can get both. Like it's not you can't have your cake and eat it too type situation. You can be more compliant and you can add automation and you can be faster with service delivery, easier for technicians to do what they need to do. You can have your cake and eat it too because of automation and because of all the things that are behind automation, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think we're getting towards the end of this conversation, right? So of course, I've taken up questions as we go along as well. I think we've answered most of the questions. Some are repetitive, but of course we can touch on a few of those as well. But yeah, please keep the questions coming in. I think it's a good time to launch the partnership as well, Martin. There is a little something in that we want to announce for everyone who's part of this conversation, right? Something really cool as well. So as Tech ID Manager and Zomentum are officially partnering up, right? And by means of this partnership, we are enabling a number of cool things, a lot of value for each of our partners and customers that we work with. And of course, I let Martin kind of finish up half of this equation for all of the Tech ID managers who want to get a taste of Zomentum. So Zomentum is a full-blown sales revenue platform, right? It's for quoting, proposals, e-signatures, payment processing, all of that in one platform. And we are providing it free of cost for all Tech ID managers as part of this exclusive partnership. So if you want to get started, if you want to try out Zomentum and get started, it's free. It's enabled by Tech ID Manager. So yeah, that's something that we will also share some links on if you want to get started and try that out. And we've got something cool for all Zomentum customers as well. And Martin, if you want to announce that for all Zomentum customers who want to leverage Tech ID solutions.
Yes, if you go to the Zomentum Marketplace, you'll find Tech ID Manager there. And there's a pretty significant discount for existing Zomentum customers when you come sign up with Tech ID Manager. There you can find all the information about that and all the details in Zomentum. And there's also some links that Raghav will share here shortly that cover all that. We're very excited about it. We love like what Zomentum does. We think it's great. They're on the beginning side of the process, and we are on the service delivery side of it for privileged account management. It's a good thing to do. It's always good when companies work together and help provide more value to all the MSPs out there.
Awesome. So yeah, just to reiterate, folks, there is a link shared on the chat window. You can access that. If you don't have a Zomentum account, you can sign up using that account, and you will never have to pay $1 for your quoting software ever again, right? So it's free of cost, and that's powered by Tech ID Manager, right? So it's an exclusive partnership that we have with Tech ID Manager. And for all Zomentum customers, users who already have a Zomentum account who want to take advantage of Tech ID Manager solutions, you can head to your marketplace inside the Zomentum application. And if you go look for Tech ID Manager, and you can become part of their ecosystem as well. So you get exclusive perks, exclusive discounts, through this that you will not find outside of this partnership, right? So that's something in it for all of our ecosystem as well. We're very excited for it. I think there's a couple of questions from Ahmed about where is the link. Just shared that on the chat. Oh, right. I think I've shared that with just myself. So that's a bit of a newbie mistake. So I've just shared that with everyone as well. So you have a link on the chat. So you can use that to activate your free account. If you would like to talk to somebody, there is an option through that link as well. Once you get in, for you to be able to book a time with somebody from the Zomentum team who'll walk you through the platform, help you get started as well. The platform is free of cost, but of course you get all the support, all the implementation, onboarding, and everything that you would otherwise get as well. So you can take advantage, leverage all the support and functionality that are available as part of this ecosystem. But yeah, if you have any other questions as well, please do type out. I know we are running out of time, so we may not be able to take questions live, but we will be answering back on email right after this as well, right? So we will follow. I think I've got 4 or 5 questions on the Q&A. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take all of those questions, but we will be responding to all of those questions right after this session as well. But I think on that note, we will sign off for this session. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to either myself, you've got my contacts here, or Martin's emails are on the screen as well. And yeah, we look forward to welcoming you to this partnership and this journey as well. Thank you so much, folks.